Hello everyone and welcome back to the Sports with Frank podcast, another Monday edition of the pod today. A lot to dive into. We had the semifinals for the Coppa Italia, so we're gonna go over what happened during these games and talk a bit about the final. However, the main focus on the final will happen on Wednesday, and then we're gonna start previewing, of course, the Premier League. And also today we're starting an analysis, team by team, for the teams that are involved in this Champions League race, because as we know, Man City are awaiting the final decision regarding their participation in the Champions League next year and the year after. We know there is a trial going on now at UEFA with City being involved due to their alleged violations of the financial fair play scheme. So for now, that fifth spot in the table in the Premier League doesn't necessarily mean Champions League, but there could be a chance that the fifth team in the Prem is actually qualified to the European Cup. So all this and more, let's dive right into it. This is the Sports with Frank podcast. I'm Francesco. Let's do this. Another weekend of football is behind us. We had the return of Italian football with the Coppa Italia Semifinals that were, I think there is a lot to talk about for both of these games, because we saw different forms among those different four teams. We saw, different approaches to the games, so definitely a lot to unpack. So I say we get right into the first semi-final that was Juventus against Milan. The first semi-final was played on Friday, and this was on paper, I talked about it last week, how for me it was the hardest one to predict, because the values on the pitch were, very different. Like Milan was going to this game missing its two best players, in Ibrahimovic and Theo Hernandez. They didn't have Castillejo, which is another important part of their team. While Juventus was going into this game with basically all the players available, apart from Higuain, that had picked up a small injury, and Ramsey, and besides those two, also Chiellini and Demiral, but those are two players that were returning from big injuries. Both of them had ACL. They were not risked in this game. So Juve basically had their full team, or at least their full starting 11 in a normal game. So they were just missing some bench pieces. And going into this game, I was confident that Juve had the right weapons to bring on the final. And they end up doing that with a 0-0 draw, and Juve went through due to the fact that the first leg in Milan was 1-1, so that away goal made the difference. But if you watch the game, like on paper, if you see a 0-0, you believe the game was even, but I don't think it was at all. If you watch the first 30 minutes, Juve were dominating. So Juve got a penalty kick awarded to them within 10 minutes from the beginning of the game. It was missed by Cristiano Ronaldo with a great save by Donnarumma that I still can't place this guy in terms of rankings. I don't know if it's good, if it's not good, because sometimes he just does things that you believe is incredible, like this penalty save against Ronaldo. You can't even tell that he touched it, but with the tip of his fingers, he touched the ball and sent it to the post. And then some other times, even in this game, he just tries to get the ball, comes out of goal, flies around recklessly. And so I still don't know where to place him, but in this game, I think he was a plus for AC Milan. And that penalty was missed. Basically, a minute after, there was a killer, tackle by Ante Rebic, that in this game was supposed to be the lone striker for Milan, that already had the need for scoring, and then Rebic gets sent off. I mean, clear red in my opinion, and the game seemed to be downhill for them from then onwards, because the way we played until then, it was incredible. They were all over Milan. The pressing was unbelievable. They were able to get into the goal, the penalty area, which is something that Juve has struggled to do over this first 6 months, let's say, with Sarri. There was always a lot of nice passing around, but there was nobody inside the penalty area to kind of take advantage of the ball being put in. And in this game, I think, especially with their fullbacks, with Danilo and Alexandro, which in my opinion played an incredible game, both of them, they managed to do that. So Juve were actually doing better than they did before this break, but they couldn't get through. And I think at some point they just settled down, especially after the ejection. It felt to me like Juve were not trying anymore, because they knew that AC Milan was already in a bad position at the beginning of the game, and after being left in 10 men, they kind of try to handle the game rather than win the game. And I think it paid off eventually because Juve went through, but there were some situations in which AC Milan could actually, score that goal, and we all know how it goes, like, especially against a team like AC Milan that were playing basically, they were all covering their own part of the pitch, and they weren't really trying to go press the ball high and get the ball in Juventus part of the pitch. And they were waiting a lot, and if a team like that managed to score even a random goal from set piece, they had a chance with Kier, their centre back, from a free kick from the side. It was probably gonna be ruled out if the ball went in because the guy seemed to be on offside, but they had that chance, and if that was converted and it was allowed, that could have been a bad thing for Juventus. So I don't really like this tendency of teams to wait for the opposition and just handle the game. This is very similar to what we talked about when we analyzed that Borussia Dortmund-Bayern Munich game, where I believe that Borussia approached the game in the wrong way. There was, of course, the vibes on the pitch were different. Borussia was the team, that were lacking talent compared to Bayern Munich, at least in their starting 11. So it was a different approach in terms of what the opposition was, but at the end of the day, the result is always the same. There's a waiting for the other team. It's a very Italian thing to do, and I don't think it can pay off eventually like it did for Juve. But you always run the chances, especially in these two legs games, to allow the other team to score a goal that will give them confidence, and it will make them close themselves even more at the back, and eventually ruin the game for the team that's trying to pull this off. So eventually, as I said, Juve ended up winning the two games, the aggregate for the two games, but I didn't really see the maximum potential of this team, and I think that's good in a sense. We'll talk about Inter later. Inter is the team that, in my opinion, has played the best of these four teams in these two semifinals. But I believe that now, and I talked about this before, this is basically a new season starting right now for every team. The way the team approached the preparation to this next part of the season, it's very different. For a team that needs to, avoid relegation, or a team that maybe wants to take home a trophy, like could be AC Milan, could have been that, Napoli, but even Inter, because those are all three teams that they don't have high expectations for the other competitions they are in. Inter may try and win Europa League, but I think eventually there are teams that I like more. And Juve kind of looked to me like they were preparing, for a late run rather than being at 100% right now. 100% is probably unlikely for any team at this point. But even a team, like Bayern Munich, they've been doing very, very well since the return to Bundesliga, since game one. So I don't know what to think. Bayern are going to have much more time between the end of their season and the beginning of the Champions League, again in August. We should get actual dates on that on Wednesday, so we'll definitely cover that as well. But Juventus are going to basically get the end of the Serie A on August 1st, I believe, and then the Champions League should restart with a return leg against Lyon on the 8th. So they only have a week between the two competitions, while Bayern are going to have in the range of 3-4 weeks. So it's hard to understand, the real value of teams. But the first 30 minutes, I think Juve showed that they're kind of, taking in Sarri's idea of football. You could see a lot of quick passes, a lot of nice combinations between players that you really couldn't see much before the coronavirus break. So overall, a satisfying performance. I think Juve has a lot of room for improvement. There were some players that impressed me a lot. Bentancur, in my opinion, was the MVP of this game. He did amazingly. It was incredible in pressing the ball. He was very, very good with his vision of the field. And I think going forward, this is a guy that Juve should really, build their midfield around. Then De Ligt, a guy that had a lot of trouble at the beginning of the season adapting to a new kind of football, but so far has been, in 2020, in my opinion, the best defender for Juve. And then, as I said, the fullbacks, Danilo and Alexandro, played a very, very nice game. And then there is Ronaldo. He got a lot of criticism over the week. He got, especially after missing that penalty, people saying that, he was supposed to come back and be the best player on the pitch. This is the same thing for the team. Like, Ronaldo is a machine. He's the best doctor for himself. He knows that he has to be a stop level when the games count on higher level, like in the Champions League. And I don't think he's going to try at all to be at his top right now, because the season is still very long and still there's a lot of games to be played in a very, very short amount of time. because you believe that Juve are playing Wednesday and their next game will be on a Monday. And then from then onwards, it's every 3 days. Ronaldo knows that, and I wouldn't be worried about him now. The other team was AC Milan instead, and I think they showed some signs. I mean, this is a team that talent-wise, especially without these two players that I mentioned before, Ibrahimovic and Hernandez, they don't really have much going on for them. As I said, Donnarumma was probably the best player they had the other day. He saved the penalty, and he had a couple of nice saves on Alexander at the end of the game, one on Matuidi. They weren't too hard, but nonetheless, he kept it out of goal. But for the rest of the team, I don't see much talent there. My best bet for a guy that could actually become a pretty good footballer is Benacer. We know he won the MVP for the African Cup in January for Algeria. In a competition, and even in the same team, there's other guys like Riyad Mahrez. So there was quite a competition for that award itself. And I think he has the right tools to be an effective, center defensive mid. I don't think he has, the right skills to be a regista, so a guy, a playmaker. But I think in that position, if the coach wants more of a physical guy with good feet and good ability to defend, not just physical because he's not a huge guy, but he is very similar to Jorginho in the sense that he knows how to place himself to get the ball back. So that's another bright side for Milan. But for the rest, I honestly don't see much there. Their red card kind of cut their leg off, and they didn't manage to score a goal. They're going home knowing that they didn't lose to Juventus in the Coppa Italia. In the game they had in the Serie A, they only lost 1-0, and Juve struggled a lot in that game. And there is going to be another game between those two teams in the Serie A in a few weeks. I believe the date is the 4th of July. So we'll see if Milan can manage to keep that streak going and maybe take some other points away from Juve. This was for this Milan team the last chance really that they had to qualify for the Europa League. In my opinion, they're probably not going to make it in the Serie A. We'll see. I might be wrong, but I don't think they will. Talent-wise, I don't think they can afford to play so many games in 2 months and still be consistent. So we'll see. They're planning a rebuild, a deep one, with bringing in Rangnick from the Red Bull system there with Leipzig and all these other Red Bull properties. Rangnick is the guy that kind of plans that and organize everything there from transfer market to coaches hiring. So that they're taking him in to be, their coach and also basically the sport director. So we'll see if he works out there. But there's going to be a lot of work to be done here. Now moving to the second game, this was, a better game to watch. That's for sure, because the Juve Milan game was pretty slow after the first 30 minutes. It was a lot of tactical, arrangements that kind of slowed down the play quite a bit. While in this game, and I kind of talked, I did predict that Inter was going to come out with this kind of attitude. So they showed up at this game. After 3 minutes, they were already 1-0 for them. And that tied up the aggregate score. It was a bit of a fluky goal. Right from a corner kick, Eriksson put the ball in, and Ospina made a mistake. I think it's understandable. They haven't played an actual game in a while. Even keepers, reflex-wise, they might not be, at the top level. Ospina had an incredible game after that. This whole game, he played unbelievable after these 3 minutes. He had a big mistake there, but nonetheless, Inter went, got the advantage, tied up the aggregate score, and then from then onwards they kept attacking. They wanted that second goal because they could tell that physically they were way ahead of Napoli. Napoli was a very close team. Gattuso kind of set up the game to be, to hit Inter with the counter-attack, and that actually it's what happened with their goal. So it was a big chance for Inter. Ospina saved, and then he went long with a very nice kick, very precise kick. And he managed to pass the ball to Insigne, then got the ball in from Mertens in front of goal, and Mertens just had to tap it in. And it was a good goal for the way you could tell that's something they tried in training, so it's something that they used to do. So that's what makes the goal nice. But that's the kind of goal that a team that's managed by Conte, I don't see getting scored anytime. I'm pretty sure he's gonna be furious for the way that came about, because the defense was completely clueless. The last man defending goal was Eriksson, a guy that definitely has no defensive skills. Even the way that the play developed, Inter were very distracted. I think they were too focused on scoring that second goal that they forgot about defending. Because of course, if after 40 minutes you don't see the team coming at you, even defenders mentally, and that's where a defender can improve a lot with age. But Inter had two very young defenders with Skriniar and Bastoni. The age there kind of showed up with them not being as focused as they should have been, and that happened. Napoli scored. They drew the game, and from then onwards was a lot of Inter, a lot of like attacking but without a plan. There was a lot of going forward, especially with their two wing backs, Ashley Young on one side and Candreva, that probably was the best player for Inter in this game. They went on and on and on. They tried to put the ball in. Lukaku was kind of helpless. He was marked by Koulibaly. He couldn't do much at all. And I don't know, it seemed to me like Inter were so focused on getting this result by scoring as much as they could, they forgot that, the other team was playing as well. They were trying to be so aggressive going forward that they left a lot of room for Napoli to develop their plays. If you look at the stats, you believe that, Inter was unlucky and then they should have won the game. But I'm telling you, even though Ospina was probably the best player on the pitch for Napoli, the way Inter attacked the ball and even the shots they got off, they weren't this dangerous. There were a couple that, yes, were incredibly saved by Ospina, but the majority of those plays, as I said, they were random chances. There was not a plan behind the play. And I think a lot of that was due to the fact that Gattuso did an incredible job of blocking Brozovic. We talked about him last week, how I believe he's one of the best in the playmaker role in the Serie A. He was completely, blocked by Demme there in the center of the pitch, and without him, Inter kind of lose their unpredictability and their ability to make plays. Conte tried to go for Eriksson a bit forward to kind of give Inter two ways to develop their plays. It didn't really work out. Eriksson had the goal, had another nice shot, but overall, I think he's a guy that still doesn't fit in this team and for the way they want to play. I don't know if Conte will be able to kind of shape him up differently, but for now, I think he is not doing well, and I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see much of him going forward after this game. Even with the goal, I don't think he had a nice performance at all. And then Lautaro Martinez factor, a guy that I think or is already thinking about Barcelona. The voices coming from the transfer market gurus are saying Barcelona are on him and they want him to come over to Spain. It seems like the guy wants to join as well. He wants to play with Leo Messi. Inter are kind of trying to keep him. They're saying that there is this release clause. They can only get him if they pay. But the feeling that I'm getting is that this guy has already made up his mind. And if he's staying, I don't know if it's good for Inter either. Because in football, being mentally devoted to the team, it's very important. And we've seen this plenty of time with so many other players before. And if you don't have that, and if you think that the team did you wrong by keeping you over, if you wanted to go to another team and play in another league, it's always going to reflect badly on your performances. And the other day was a clear show of that. If you compare two bad performances for those two games, one is Cristiano Ronaldo and one is Lautaro Martinez. With Ronaldo, you could see he was trying to get the ball. He was moving around a lot. He touched a lot of passes from the midfielders. He tried to be a playmaker on the offensive side, and he couldn't. It was unlucky that he couldn't get the penalty going in, because if he scored on the pen, we would have been talking about a different performance by Cristiano Ronaldo. But Martinez, on the contrary, wasn't. It looked to me like he wasn't producing any effort in this game. It looked to me like he was playing, but he wasn't really trying, if you know what I mean. I've seen some nice performances by this guy, especially in the Champions League over the course of this season, so I know that he can do certain things, but at the end of the day, he's a 23-year-old kid that really wants to join his probably idol in Leo Messi, and he's seeing his current club opposing to this transfer without really giving him anything to be happy about, because Inter hasn't talked about renewing his contract at all. that could be definitely something that could interest Martinez, because we all know, as much as sentiment and romance counts in football, money is also a big part. Martinez now, I don't think he even makes 2 million a year. He's definitely not in the highest paid players at Inter, and he's probably their best player. And of course, if I were a player like that, I would be like, yes, I'm staying, but I want, let's talk about renewing this contract. Inter hasn't even give out the idea that that could be in the plans. What they've been saying to newspapers and TV is mainly that there is this release clause. If Barcelona wants him, they needs to come and pay. But there is no reference whatsoever to renewing this guy contract, maybe increasing his salary by 2-3 times to show him that he's an important part of this team. So I don't know what's going to happen with him, but coming out of this game, I think Inter supporters should be worried. Not that he's going to go, but he is going to stay. Because, again, if a player stays and he doesn't have the intention to stay and he's forced to stay, he's never going to perform well. That's impossible, and you can be as professional as you like, but if you're somewhere where you don't want to stay, and that goes for any job, it doesn't matter how much you make. If you're doing a job that you don't like, you're never going to be as good as you could be doing something else. So we'll see. Definitely that's a narrative coming out of this game. Regarding Napoli, the team that's actually making the final, I think they played a very good game. They knew they were in top form physically. They played a game of waiting, but differently to what Juventus did. Because in this case, Napoli knew that Inter had to score this goal to go through, but they also knew that physically they weren't as well prepared as this Antonio Conte team were. And I didn't see them training at all, Inter, but I could tell in my last podcast that this was the way they were going to come out, because we know what kind of manager Conte is. So Gattuso did very well in predicting that and shaping up his team to be very effective on the counter-attack with his front three. They have Politano on the right, Insigne on the left, and Mertens, that's honestly being unbelievable. He's such an underrated player in my opinion. He doesn't really get mentioned enough in the conversation for best striker in the Serie A. People talk about Immobile or Lukaku, but I think honestly for what he brings to the team, and not just in terms of goals, but this is a guy that fights. For a guy that's 5'7", something like that, he fights off like he's 2 meters tall, and I think he deserves more praises. But Gattuso again, great game, great planning, and I think going to the final, Juve should be worried, because this is a team that, they didn't do much offensively against Inter. They played a game of waiting, but they kind of planned it their way. And I think physically, if you look at both of these teams, I think they're actually very much on the same level in terms of what they can actually do over the course of 90 minutes. And it's going to be interesting to see how the two managers are going to, attack this game, because if you're in Sarri or Gattuso, you're going to go at it right away, try to get a goal in, and then, be solid in the back and try to play the ball, keep the possession as much as possible. Or are you going to let the other team come at you first, even take some risks, but then they're going to finish the fuel that they have in them? Because to be honest, at this point, having fuel for more than 35-40 minutes, it would shock me if either of these teams do. So we'll see, but it's definitely going to be a lot of tactical planning and arrangements that are going to go into preparing this game. And we'll see. In the game they played against each other, those two teams with these two coaches, Napoli managed to come away with a win. It was a 2-1 win in Naples back in January. The result is actually lying, because Juve managed to get the extra goal, but it was basically in their stoppage time in that game. So we'll see what happens. Talent-wise, Juve have better team, but Napoli have some players that, especially against Juventus and especially against this coach, Sarri, they can go off. And I'm particularly talking about Insigne, a guy that against Juve does always great. And I think all these players want to get this title for Gattuso. We talked about his particular situation going into this game, and also to prove to Sarri that he made a mistake by going to Juve and betrayed them according to what they say. So definitely interesting game. We'll talk more about the game specifically on Wednesday, but I think it's going to be a nice little bow on this Coppa Italia before diving back into the Serie A. Now, as I promised at the beginning, we're going to dive into team by team into the teams that are currently fighting for the 4th, 5th spot in the Premier League, because now more than ever, the 5th spot could represent, the chance to get to the Champions League. Man City are going to wait for these results. They're probably going to end up coming out late in August. I think that's when we realistically should expect a final sentence on that. Just as a reminder, the first request by UEFA was a 2-year ban from European Cups. That also includes Europa League. And I think best case scenario for City, they get down to 1 year. I don't know in the specifics what they have, the files and all the evidence they brought in for this trial, but I think for what I heard, best case scenario would be a year ban for Man City. I wouldn't be surprised though if they stick to these 2 years, but as we know, money means a lot in UEFA, and City is one of these teams that has a lot of money, so we'll see. So for that reason, looking at the table now, the 5th spot becomes very, very interesting. So far, Leicester City is number 3 in the table. 53 points, 8 points ahead of Manchester United. There is 9 games to go, but for the way Leicester have played, I think I would take them for qualified already. Even if it's not mathematical, I don't see them falling that much, especially because Brendan Rodgers has brought a nice culture in them. After winning the title with Ranieri, they had a bit of a couple of years where they weren't really doing well, not as well as Ranieri, because they would be incredible, but not well at all. They weren't qualified for Europa League even. But now with Brendan Rodgers, they've had a very nice young team. A few players to look out for. Ndidi, that's someone that I really like in that defensive mid position. Tielemans, a guy that has been, he's been considered to be a talent for a long time. First Anderlecht, then he went to Monaco. He didn't really do great in Monaco, but he managed to, get called by Leicester. And in England, he has been extremely good so far. So another guy, 23 years of age, to look forward to watch. And then of course Jamie Vardy, Schmeichel is still the keeper. Overall, a very solid team. So I think they will go through and they will qualify for the Champions League. So the teams that I want to focus on are going to be those that are fighting for that 4th, 5th spot, as I said, and that includes Chelsea, Manchester United, Wolverhampton, and Sheffield United, and even Tottenham and Arsenal. Now the thing with Arsenal, they still have a game in hand. As I said, they're going to be playing that this week on Wednesday the 17th against Man City, and Man City will want to win this game because they want Liverpool to celebrate as late as possible. I think it's inevitable that Liverpool will win the Premier League, the first Premier League title for them since the league was being renamed. And but Man City want to delay it as much as possible. So I don't think they're going to go into this game with any less motivation. So it's going to be a big test for Arsenal. But if they manage to win that game, they will get up to the 7th spot, competing there with Sheffield United. So definitely in the race. And today we're going to start with Chelsea, analyzing where they're at, what their expectations should be, and what I think they'll end up doing. Right, Chelsea. So first of all, let's start from reminding everybody that this is a team that last year won the Europa League, which makes them the 17th best team in Europe, which is not a bad starting point for a guy like Lampard, who comes out from Derby County, comes up, the legend gets back to Stamford Bridge, a lot of faith in him. Starts the season without really a transfer window because Chelsea was banned from making transfers for the summer. They had they were smart enough to sign Christian Pulisic in January from Borussia Dortmund. He came over in the summer, but that was allowed because the signing happened before the ban. So this is a team that really is basing its own strategy around the youth players that came out of the academy. That includes, of course, Reece James, the right back. They have Atsunoji, a guy that already been, he was already in the first team with Sarri, had a few injuries, but should become a big part of this team going forward. Tammy Abraham, the striker, came back after a year on loan at Aston Villa, in the Championship where he did very well. Aston Villa was promoted last year. And Mason Mount, a guy that Lampard already had at Derby County, a calm, do-it-all midfielder. So a lot of young pieces in this team. And then that's mixed very well with experienced players. They include Azpilicueta. They have of course, Kante, that is still 29, but he had a lot of championship runs under his belt, 2 Premier League titles already, a World Cup. So it's a guy that definitely has what it takes to lead the rest. Jorginho, it was brought in by Sarri last year, and everybody thought that with Sarri would go, Jorginho would follow. But he's now a central piece in this team. And then Kovacic, even if he's 26, another guy that has seen a lot of important locker rooms and definitely brings that experience. And then of course Giroud, Willian, Pedro. So it's a very nice mix of young talent and experienced players, and they're doing pretty well. In the Champions League, they did well in their group stages, not so well against Bayern Munich. They're probably going to get eliminated, but this is a team that's rebuilding, and they're trying to lay down a foundation that can take them to a high level and to stay there for several years. If you think at the age of all these players, the critical ones, and if you think how they can develop, really the sky is the limit for this team. Right now it's hard to win in the Premier League because of course you have Liverpool and Manchester City, 2 juggernauts, so it's very difficult for any team to kind of build up something that can compete with them right away. But I think what Chelsea are doing, and I think that's very smart, is to plan ahead and say, right, we cannot win now, we're going to try and win later on when these other teams are going to lose some of their players, their top players, because of age. If you look at Liverpool, Van Dijk, an incredible defender, but he's already 30 years of age. He's going to be around for another 2-3 years at a high level, but eventually he's going to decrease in performance. And then you have, their midfielder, Jordan Henderson, Milner, even Wijnaldum, like all those players that have been focal for this team, in their Champions League run and this year Premier League run, all of them are going towards the descending part of their career. So a lot of key pieces in these teams, even though Liverpool has a lot of young talent, Alisson, that people think he's old, but he's not at all. For a keeper, he's super young still. Then Alexander-Arnold, Joe Gomez, that's proven to be a very solid defender. In my opinion, very underrated just because he plays next to Van Dijk. A lot of players give him credit to be, to make him better. But I think Joe Gomez is actually very good on his own rather than because of Van Dijk, but that's another story. And same goes for City. City are going to lose a lot of talent this year. David Silva, a guy that's been there for all the wins, is going to leave. De Bruyne is almost 30 years of age. It looks like he's 18, but it is not as young as he used to be. So in the span of 2-3 years, Chelsea are going to be perfectly placed to make a run for the title, but also for the Champions League. And I think Lampard is the right coach because he's a coach that is not yet at the top level, but I think he can grow with the team and go step by step with them and get to the point when the team is ready. He's going to be ready to face that tough competition in Europe and to face that tough competition in the UK. So great building for Chelsea, and now they're trying to bring in a lot of talent to mix together with this youth that they already have. Werner seems to be bound for Stamford Bridge. Ziyech was already bought in January. Chilwell seems to be another guy that can come over from Leicester. So far has been one of the best left back in the Prem over the course of this season. I think the amount of money that Leicester are asking for is too much, but if Chelsea think he is the guy, then they should go and get him. So those are three new players that can actually fit right away in this team and give them an extra boost. Still, all of them extremely young. And Lampard, it's up to him to find them the perfect fit, and the balance really with the youth, because those players want to, now they are there at the big team, and I don't think they want to go anywhere and they want to be playing. So the more time you bring in, the more you kind of challenge the manager to show that he can handle such a locker room. And to be honest, a guy like Lampard, after everything he won and all the experience he had between Chelsea and especially in England as well, because he never won anything with his national team, but he was a focal point there with plenty of stars in both of these adventures. I think it's a perfect candidate to play that role. Very similar to what Zidane has been doing at Real Madrid. Because coaches that never played at a high level, it's very unlikely that they can be, that figure in huge locker rooms. The only exception is Jose Mourinho. Otherwise, many times they get kind of overtaken by, skilled players, top players. Like could be, if you train a team like Barcelona, we saw what happened with a guy like Valverde. He never really, had a grip on the team because he didn't have the respect that other coaches could have. When Guardiola was there, Guardiola really never won much, but he was such an important player for Barcelona, for other great teams around Europe, that he had that that thing inside him that allowed him to take over the team and make them follow him. And I think Lampard has the same genes. We'll see if he managed to get this team right, but I think he will. So going into this last bit of the season with what he has now, I think he has a good chance to grow himself, because now every game is going to be a final for Chelsea, because Chelsea are now fourth in the league, but they're not safe at all from all the other teams. Like, they're only 5 points ahead of Wolves, Sheffield, and potentially Arsenal. So going into the next 9 games of the season, 4 of them are going to be finals for Lampard. And I think, if he goes according to what I believe of him, Chelsea are going to have a nice little run. Are going to qualify for next year's Champions League, keep building and keep improving on what they have. So I'm all for it. My favorite English team, I wouldn't say I'm a big supporter, but the team that I've always liked the most was Arsenal. Sometimes hope that Arsenal would do the same as Chelsea did last summer. Even in the adversity of not having a transfer market, just deciding we're going to take this as our year zero. And from now onwards, we're going to build on what we have. And we're going to just add small pieces, 1-2 players at a time, to our base core of players that were born in this club and know what it means to play for this shirt. So I'm all for it, looking forward to what happens, but great job there by Abramovich and the rest of the management at Chelsea. There it is, another episode comes to an end. There's a nice little analysis on Chelsea there. I'm looking forward to more and more of this as the Premier League returns. We're going to have another one on Wednesday when we're also going to preview some of the games, and then another one on Friday. So, 5 teams, once per episode. We're going to dissect where they're at and what my expectations for them are going to be going into this season, but also focusing on their future and really their expectations. As I said, on Wednesday, we're also going to preview the final between Juventus and Napoli. That's happening on Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Italian time, so 8 p.m. the UK. Before we go, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave a rate and review. 5 stars would be much appreciated. The more good reviews I get, the more the podcast gets exposed and gets seen by people, so we can grow the community. And on that note, if you go on my Twitter account, which is @sportswithfrank, you can find a link to a Telegram channel that I created as a sort of a way for people that listen to the podcast to talk about football, talk about NBA, NFL, everything that's covered in this podcast is topic of conversation on this group. So go check that out. And you can also follow me on Instagram. We're at sports_with_Frank. So just give me a follow everywhere. We can grow and grow all together. Apart from that, I'll see you all again on Wednesday. This was the Sports with Frank podcast. I've been Francesco. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon.